Hello, my name is Nick Thomas. I'm a professional juggler and slinkier, and today we're gonna learn how to do a basic bounce. It looks something like that, and it's actually not that hard to learn how to do, and you don't need to know any other slinky tricks to get started with this one. However, if you don't already, I would recommend learning how to do the energy beam, so you can do the energy beam into a bounce, back into the energy beam just like that. So if you want to learn how to do the energy beam, you can watch my video if you click in the top right up there. But again, it's not necessary to know, but you can learn them both at the same time. Now you can do a bounce with just about any slinky, but I really recommend doing it with one about this size, about 3.5 inches. I have some links in the description if you want to get your own, but it's a lot easier with one of these than with a jumbo slinky. You can learn this trick with the smaller slinky, but in my opinion, it just doesn't look as cool. Now the first thing we want to do is make sure we have a nice surface to bounce off of. Ideally, we want the surface to be nice and flat and very solid, and we don't want to be too far from our hands. So something about this height would be great. We're not going to be learning off the ground just yet. That is a lot more difficult. Now, if you can't find a nice surface to bounce off of, you can actually just sit on the ground and then bounce it off the ground. Next, what we want to do is decide which hand is going to do the bouncing and then put the slinky in the other hand. So I'm going to be doing the bouncing with my right hand, so I place the slinky in my left, and it's just going to stay nice and flat. We're not going to be gripping the slinky with this hand, we're just going to keep it nice and flat as if it were on a surface. Next, what we're going to do is with our other hand, grab about 3 or so of the coils. And when you first get started, you can grab a few more, or if you have a slinky with very thin coils, you may have to grab up to about 1/3 of them. But eventually, we're gonna try to only hold about 3 or so of the coils. So with our coils held, what we're going to do is basically make about 2/3 of a rainbow shape. So coming down just like this, and then coming to a stop. We wanna make sure it's a very quick motion with a very sudden stop. So it looks something like this. Just like that. And make sure when you do the bounce, you keep holding onto the coils. We're not gonna be letting go with this hand, or else it's just gonna flop like that. And one thing to make sure of is when you do this motion, make sure this hand here doesn't start to rotate to sort of spill the slinky out. You wanna make sure it just comes to a complete stop and stays nice and still. Now, ideally, we want the slinky to land flat on the table. We don't want it to come in at an angle or anything like that. We want it to land nice and flat. And to do that, really make sure that when you do this motion, you do the rotate and then the quick stop. Almost think of it like opening a book very quickly. And make sure the hand that's just holding the slinky stays nice and still. You don't want to kind of push the slinky off. I see a lot of people tend to do that. Now, we don't want to go too slow with this motion. And as long as you come to a sudden stop, there's really no such thing as going too fast. So practice doing the bounce and having it land on a surface, and make sure that starts to feel comfortable and you don't even have to think about the movement. And once it starts to feel like second nature, we're gonna try to bring the slinky back to the other hand. So to do that, we're gonna do basically the opposite motion we were doing before. So before we were making 2/3 of the rainbow, now we're gonna make the full rainbow and the slinky will come back to the other hand. We wanna make sure we're doing a very quick movement just like this. It's going to be very fast. Most people start off too slow. It's going to be a quick movement, but we also want to make sure we're doing it at the right time. The correct time to do this movement is when the most amount of coils are on your surface and it starts to naturally bounce back. When all the coils are on the surface and it starts to come back, you're actually going to feel a slight tug on your hand. So if you're struggling to figure out exactly when that tug is, what you can do is actually close your eyes, do the bounce, and then you can really feel when that tug is. Right there. There, there, and that's how I initially learned how to time it. So once we do the bounce, we do that quick rainbow right back, and then what we're gonna try to do is catch it with this hand. Now, ideally, we don't wanna move this hand too much. It should just sort of come right back to where it was, but you might have to make some slight adjustments. So make sure you're watching the other end and then try to catch it right as it starts coming down. You don't wanna catch it too early, when it's still sideways. And it's actually okay if you catch it a little bit later, because then the slinky is sort of naturally falling straight down and it'll be a little easier to catch. And if you're not doing this trick from the energy beam, what you can do to make a really nice finish is basically take that hand and then close it up, kind of the opposite movement that you did to get it started. So do the bounce, close it up, and it'll look something like that. Now this will take a lot of practice to perfect. The biggest problem I see people have is they do everything a little too slow. You need to have nice quick movements, so make sure you're doing a quick pull, quick rainbow, and then close it up. If you go too slow, you're kind of just gonna end up swinging the Slinky around. We really wanna keep it nice and small, do the bounce, and have it come back just like that. We're not gonna be going like this and doing it too slow. We want a quick movement down, quick rainbow, and then we should be good. You also might struggle a little bit with catching the Slinky with the opposite hand. My best advice for that would be to spread out your fingers as much as you can, and then try to close in on the Slinky once it's there. Like that. You also can make sure you watch the end of the Slinky the whole way, so your hand will sort of know where to go a little bit earlier, but the more you practice it, the easier it's gonna become. Now, if you wanna do this trick from the energy beam, the steps are gonna be pretty similar. So you do the energy beam, but once you do a pull with the hand that basically is gonna be the bouncing hand, you're going to let go with the other hand. And it'll naturally just bounce. Now the energy beam goes a little bit more left-right than at the angle we want, so it might just kind of go off to the side a little bit. So what we're gonna do is once we do a pull with the non-bounce hand, we're gonna take our other hand and sort of turn it up at an angle a little bit like this, so we can be prepared to do the more rainbow shape rather than sort of just the straight down. So it looks something like this. And going back into the energy beam is really the hard part, because if you don't catch the Slinky just right, you won't really be able to get the energy beam going because you'll be holding it kind of weird. So when you first get started, I would recommend doing the energy beam, doing the bounce, and stopping right there. And then once you feel comfortable catching the Slinky, then try to go back into the energy beam. You can also go into another bounce if you'd like, and just keep chaining them together. And with enough practice, you'll eventually be able to learn to aim the Slinky at a certain point and be able to do cool things like this, or bounce it off of someone's hand, something like that. I'll make videos in the future about aiming the Slinky at certain targets just like that, but that takes a lot more practice. So if you have any problems or questions or ideas for future videos, let me know in the comments down below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. I'll see you next time.